I hope that the first lecture was just the right amount of information. Let's get started with binary to decimal conversions. So we know that an octet, which can also be referred to as a byte, has 8-bit values. Each of those bits represents a decimal value, as shown on the table from left to right. The first bit is 128, the second one is 64, and then from there we just keep dividing by 2. So the third one is 32, then we have 16, 8, 4, 2, and 1. The reason for this is not important. All you have to remember is to start at 128 and divide by 2 each new bit value. But if you really want to know, it stems from the equation 2 to the power of 8 minus 1 equals 255. When you add up all the bit values from 128 to 1, you get 255. You subtract the 1 because 0 is used in the range. And the 2 comes from a bit being able to have 2 different values, on or off. As you can see in the exercise, the 1 represents on and the 0 represents off, letting you know which decimal values to focus on. Now, when you are converting from binary to decimal, only focus on the ones. When you see a 1, you're going to add up all the decimal values for those bits. So in the first one, we have the first bit as on, so we're going to use 128 plus the fourth bit, which is 16, to give us 144 plus 2, which equals 146. Now let's go on to the second one. I'm going to bring out the calculator here. We have the second bit on, so we're going to start with 64 this time. And then we're going to use 32 and 16. So plus 48. This is 112. And then we're also going to use the last 3 bits here. So we have 4 plus 2 plus 1, which equals 7. We're going to add 7 to this. And we get 119. Now for the third one. On the third one, you see that every bit value is turned on. As we saw before, when you add up all the bit values, you get 255. For the fourth one, we have 128 plus 64, which equals 192. Plus 4. And 1 for the last bit value. So we're going to add 5 to this. And the decimal conversion for that string of bits is going to be 197. Go ahead and pause the video and finish the rest of the table on your own. Now it's time to go in reverse. When converting to binary from decimal, all that you want to do is use the process of elimination. You start at the left and mark a 1 if that bit value fits inside of your decimal. If it does not, you use a 0. Luckily for us, they already did the first 2 problems. So for the first one, they give us 238 to start with. So we come over here to the first bit value and we check to see if 128 fits inside of 238. Yes, it does. So we mark a 1. And then we're left with 110. Does 64 fit inside of 110? Yes, it does. So we mark a 1 again. 32 fits, so we mark a 1 again. Now we have 14 and 16. 16 does not fit inside of 14, so we'll mark a 0 here. And then after that, we have 4, which does fit into 6, and then we have 2, which fits into 2. 1 does not fit into 0, so we mark that as 0. For the second problem, they give us 34 to start with. So if you want to turn 34 into binary, you're going to start at the left and see that 128 and 64 are both too big, so you're going to mark those as 0. 32 fits inside of 34, so you mark it as a 1. The only other 2 numbers that will fit inside of 2 are 2 and 1, but we have to start with 2 because it's the most left. Let's go ahead and run through the next 2 problems together. So for the third one, they want us to start with 123. Does 128 fit inside of 123? No, it doesn't, so we mark the first bit as a 0. And then we subtract 64 and mark the second bit as a 1. subtract 32 and mark the third bit as a 1, subtract 16 and mark another 1, subtract 8 and mark another 1, and then does 4 fit into 3? No, it doesn't. That's why we have a 0 right here. And then we do know that 2 fits in 3 and 1 fits inside of 1, so we have 1 and 1. Now let's move on to the fourth one. They want us to start out with 50. Does 128 or 64 fit inside of 50? No, they don't. So the first 2 bits will be 0. 32 fits, so we'll mark that as a 1 and subtract 32. And then 16 does fit inside of 18. So we'll subtract 16. And that gives us 2. So we'll mark that as a 1. And then 8 and 4 are too big, so we'll mark those as 0. 2 fits, so we'll mark that as a 1. And then 1 does not fit into 0, so we'll mark that as a 0. Go ahead and do the rest on your own. Conversions are honestly one of the most difficult parts of IPv4 and subnetting. So much for the you have to be good at math to be an IT rumor, huh? You're doing great. Keep the momentum going, and I will see you in the next lecture.